welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast. I'm Aaron Apollo Camp. For today's episode, I had the honor of interviewing Teri M. Brown, the author of Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. Sunflowers Beneath the Snow is an historical fiction set in Soviet-era Ukraine, and it was published less than 2 months before the currently ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine began. I'm here with Teri M. Brown, the author of the historical fiction book Sunflowers Beneath the Snow. Teri, welcome to the Heartland Author Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here.
Feel free to introduce yourself to our listeners.
All right, so I'm Teri M. Brown. I began writing nonfiction in 2000, working with small businesses, helping them do their website material and things that they needed for articles and blog posts and things along that line. And in 2017, I got the opportunity to go to a writer's retreat where I tried my hand for the first time at fiction writing, and I've kind of never looked back from that point. And in 2021, I got my book Sunflowers Beneath the Snow accepted with Atmosphere Press. It launched in January of this year, so in 2022. And as of earlier this week, my second book has just been accepted. So I'm really excited. I'm on my way.
Without spoiling too much of your book, what is Sunflowers Beneath the Snow about?
All right, so it is a historical fiction, and really ironically, based on all that's going on in the world right now, it's set in Ukraine. And it follows 3 generations of women. And it starts with the oldest generation of woman. She's the grandmother in this story. Her husband was a rebel, and she was unaware that he was taking part in some of these rebellious activities. And he got caught, and he was pretty much given the decision, are you going to stay? Because if you are, we'll have to kill you. Or are you going to let us whisk you out of the country? However, to be whisked out of the country also meant that he had to leave his wife and daughter behind. That's eventually what he decided to do. And then from that point, we follow these 3 women as they learn to survive in Soviet Ukraine, figure out how to kind of traverse everything as Ukraine becomes independent. And then we follow right up until the time when Russia invades Ukraine in 2014, and then just a little beyond that to kind of conclude the story.
Now, as we are speaking right now, horrific atrocities have been and are continuing to be committed in real life by the Russian armed forces that have invaded Ukraine. What are your thoughts about the ongoing Russian invasion of Ukraine?
Well, it's interesting. I've never been to Ukraine. I don't speak Ukrainian. But because I spent the time that I did researching and developing these characters, and one of the characters is loosely based off of someone that I know, so I feel extremely connected. And on the day that Russia actually invaded, it was not just all of their posturing on the sidelines, but they actually went into the country. I was completely devastated. It tore me up. And I've been keeping up with my friend Ksenia, who is the one who is, the book is loosely related to her. And I follow her Facebook page, and it completely tears me up. It breaks my heart. She is so angry and so grieved at the same time that you can't begin to read her posts without just feeling a sense of overwhelming loss. So I'm hoping what my book will do is give people kind of a background, so that because it's a historical fiction, it does explain the history between Ukraine and Russia, to give you an idea of, this isn't something new. This has been going on for years, the over the border and who owns what part and why there's such an animosity between them. And you learn about that in the book. And then the other thing I hope it does is it gives people more of an empathy and an understanding, because when you walk away, you feel like you know people there. And I believe that the only way to really to combat war and hatred is by having um, empathy and compassion and understanding. And so that's what I'm hoping my book can do. And additionally, right now, part of the proceeds of the book are going to help Ukraine.
That is fantastic that you are uh, using a portion of proceeds from your book to fund humanitarian efforts in Ukraine.
Yeah, I just believe that, the timing of the book was truly coincidental. I mean, anyone who knows anything about books getting out to publish recognize that there's no way that I realized that this war was about to happen and I quickly wrote a book and got it out there. I mean, that's not the way that happens. So the timing is really incredible. And I just felt that, you know, I talk a lot about the fact that I want people to understand and have empathy, and that really, if I'm going to talk that talk, I really need to walk it as well. And so that's why I'm helping. Like I said, I'm taking a portion of those proceeds and I'm turning it to Ukraine, and I'm putting it toward a fund that my friend Ksenia said was the one that she recommended. So
Yeah, yeah. Your book was published on January 5th of this year, which was about a month and a half before the Putin regime in Russia invaded Ukraine uh, in a full scale manner. And my biggest fear as an author is being seen as, and I'm going to use a term that's usually used to describe corrupt lawyers and not authors, but being seen as an ambulance chaser.
exactly, which is, I've had a few people ask me, don't you think this is the wrong time for this book? So, the way I answer that is, number one, when I put this book to the publisher, this was not going on. So in no way did I create the war, and in no way did I ambulance chase, because essentially I was kind of ahead of it before it even came out. The other thing is that I believe that literature has an opportunity to help people understand things that they might not otherwise understand. We cannot go to Ukraine. We cannot understand what's happening there other than what we see in the news. We don't have that ability, but this book can kind of take you there and help you understand the feelings that the people had when they became a free nation again after the Soviet Union, and can help you really understand why they're taking the stance that they are and the number of people who are willing to stay and fight. There are grandmothers there who they will not leave. They said, send the Russians here. They're planning to do everything they can to keep their country free. And I think that the book helps people really grasp that and understand that. And then on top of that, I'm donating to Ukraine. So, will there be people who think that? Well, of course, there's going to be people who always think unkindly of anybody. But the truth of the matter is that I feel very strongly for these people. And the young woman who the youngest character is patterned off of, she's read the book, she loves the book, and she is actually the one who asked me if I would help sell the book and use some of the funds. So, I feel like I'm doing exactly what needs to be done at this point.
This is going to be a point of clarification to something you mentioned in your introduction. Is
Mm-hmm.
Sunflowers Beneath the Snow self published or traditionally published?
Okay, so it's neither. It is hybrid published. So a self-published book or a vanity published book is when you can just go, you make all of the decisions on your own, you get it printed in whatever way that you wanted. You've done everything. You've hired your editor if you got one. You did the cover, you do everything yourself. And then traditionally published is you sign a contract, they get all of that done, and then you are given royalties for the books that are sold. A hybrid publisher is how I went, and the hybrid publisher takes kind of the best of both worlds. So I have my book through Atmosphere Press, and I paid up front. I get 100% royalties, and I have all the license for my book so that I can do with it what I want. However, they gave me an editor. They helped me with the cover. They've helped me with a little bit of the marketing. They got me a proofreader. So they did all of that aspect of it. And they also do not take everyone that comes to them. So unlike a self-publisher or a vanity press that will take anyone, they actually look at the manuscripts and make a determination as to whether or not they believe that it has any kind of merit. Will it be sellable? That kind of thing. And so they make a determination as to who they take and who they don't. So it's a little bit of both.
Now, if you have a typical writing routine, what is your typical writing routine like?
So I would love to say that I'm one of those people that get up every morning and, I write for 2 hours or whatever, but it doesn't work that way for me. I tend to like to write in really large blocks of time. So the best thing for me is to find a way to get away for 3 or 4 days or longer if I can. For instance, in June, I have a 2-week writer's retreat coming up where I will do nothing but write. And that's the best thing for me because I like to do like the whole story, get it out of my head, write it from start to finish. And at that point, it's not good. My characters aren't developed. The settings are not developed. I say too much and don't show enough, but I get the story out, and that's usually about 50,000 words. And so I love to find a period of time where I can get 50,000 words out of my head and onto paper. And then from that point, I let it sit for a little while. And then when I pick it back up, that's when I go in and I start doing that editing where I fill out those characters. I make sure that they're, fully developed. They're not flat. You tend to, when you first write something, to make things really 2D. You don't give your character enough emotion and you don't give them enough issues and problems and real, I don't know, like you can't have a character who's perfect because then you don't like them. They have to have real issues that you can understand and then identify with. And so that's what I try to do when I go back and do the editing.
You mentioned in your introduction that you had a second book approved. Could you give us a bit of a preview of that without spoiling too much of it?
Sure, I can. It's called An Enemy Like Me. It's set in World War II, and although it is set in World War II, it's not really a war story as much as it is about the angst of war. So what we have is a German American. He's first generation American, and he goes to fight in the war, and he believes he's going to go to Japan or fight the Japanese, and he ends up in Germany fighting in Germany. And he realizes that he is more like the enemy than he is different from them. And I came up with this idea because my grandfather fought in World War II in Germany. And we're German American, though we had lived in, our family had been in the United States for several generations. But even he said he often wondered if the person on the other side of the gun was someone who could potentially be, a third or fourth cousin. And it got me to thinking about the idea that a lot of times in war, governments start these wars and it's ordinary people who fight them. And in any other situation, those people that we're fighting against could easily be someone that we would sit down to dinner and enjoy their conversation. And so the book really explores that. And we see it from the standpoint of the soldier, but also from his wife and from his 4-year-old son that he left behind.
what is the best advice you could give to authors who are just starting out as authors?
Okay, so I have three things that I tell anyone who asks me this. And the first one is write. Don't let anything get in your way. Don't say, well, I'm not sure that I'm good enough. Maybe I should take a class, or I don't have a degree, or I'm too old, or I'm too young, or I'm too whatever it is that's stopping you. You're not going to get better by thinking about it. You've got to write. The second thing is once you've gotten something written and you're feeling good about it, you need to give it to someone that you trust who can help you see what works, but also see what isn't working. And you have to have the ability to listen to that and hear what they have to say and then go back and try to make some changes based on their feedback, because you're not going to learn to be a better writer all by yourself. You're going to have people who look at your work and offer suggestions. And then the third thing almost sounds like I'm contradicting myself, and it is you do not have to listen to everybody. You're going to get advice that does not work for you, that does not work for the style, does not work for what you're trying to get across to your reader, and that's okay. I recommend that you try things that people suggest, but if it doesn't work for you, that it's perfectly okay to say, that was a good idea, I gave it a shot, but it's not for me, and to put it off to one side.
Now, during the summer of 2020, this was during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic lockdowns. You went on a 3,102-mile tandem bicycle ride across the contiguous United States. How long did it take you to complete the ride, and what was that experience like?
So it took us 72 riding days, but we were actually out for a little over 90 days because, like I tell people, we're not spring chickens anymore and we couldn't just ride continually. We had to have some days of rest. It was the best and hardest thing I have ever done in my life. And for me, when I started, so I call myself a desk jockey. I'm not an athletic person. So this was a huge adventure and a ginormous undertaking, even more so than like for my husband, who's extremely athletic, and this is something he has wanted to do for years and years and years. He and I met 4 years ago, and he brought up the fact that he wanted to do this big adventure. And I decided that this sounded exactly like what I needed in my life, because I had gotten out of an extremely bad relationship where I spent 14 years in an emotionally abusive marriage. And I didn't believe in myself anymore. And I had begun writing fiction, and I was really excited about the fact that I was writing fiction, but I was afraid to let anyone see it because I didn't believe that I could ever be good enough. And after this ride, I realized that I could do absolutely anything. And it gave me enough courage to go ahead and turn my book into publishers. And, shortly thereafter, it was accepted and now it's published. The ride was amazing and horribly difficult, and amazing and horrible and amazing and horrible. And it kind of depended on what day of the week it was. We saw really cool things. We met great people despite it being COVID, and that was also this summer with all of the riots. We saw amazing people. It restored how I felt about the United States and the people that live here. Yes, there are crazy people that get in the news, but I think that the majority of people are just good, kind, hardworking people who do their best to live a good life and will do what they can to help those that they see that are in need. And at least that's what I experienced.
Well, Teri, I thank your grandfather for his service to the United States, and I thank you for appearing on the Heartland Author podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I've had a wonderful time.
I enjoyed interviewing Teri, and I wish her well on her next book. This is Aaron Apollo Camp reminding y'all to write your imagination and glory to Ukraine. Bye for now. You can learn more about me and my book writing projects at authoraac.wordpress.com. You can also follow me on Facebook and Twitter at authoraac. You can also watch videos on the Heartland Author channel on YouTube. Copyright 2022, Aaron Apollo Camp, all rights reserved. This podcast episode is intended for the private listening of its audience. Any reuse or retransmission of this podcast episode without the express written consent of the podcast host is prohibited except under fair use guidelines. Royalty-free music and sound effects obtained from https://www.zapsplat.com.